Okay.
This is.
When it's smaller, can you?
No. This is. Is it in the show or this is not PowerPoint?
No, it's
This is better.
Is that good?
Yes.
I'll get this. I'll get this off here, and we can get started.
And the microphone. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Good evening, everybody. Your Excellency, Dr. Saad Al-Qasabi, the Governor of SASO, our honorable guests. We'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Saudi Society for Quality and appreciate you taking valuable time from your personal schedules, and hopefully you will be learning new things about process management from our distinguished speaker, Mr. Donald James. We like to thank SASO for hosting this event. SASO has been very kind to the Saudi Society for Quality. Our offices are in SASO. They gave us some valuable space of this building, which we appreciate a lot. We like also to thank Modern Electronics Company for supporting the organization of this event. They are doing it as part of their social responsibility, which we encourage all companies to follow suit in their steps, because this is important for the country. We have all to try to share the responsibility of making everyone aware of the quality and the quality culture and quality concepts. Very few words about the Saudi Society for Quality. It was established as an independent professional society by the Royal Decree, or a Council of Ministers decree. The Minister of Trade and Industry, His Excellency Dr. Tawfiq Al-Rabi'a, has named the board of directors for this society a little bit more than a year and a half ago. And the time is a year, 3 years, so we have about a year or a little bit more than that to end this current stage. And there will be a General Assembly held after this 1 year, where there will be nominations for the new board of this society. The people who are qualified to nominate this board are the members. So we encourage you to be members of this organization for the society. There are membership forms outside. The membership for the first year will be free of charge, so we encourage you to record your information and also to enable us to know how to contact you in case that we have similar events. The Saudi Society for Quality has been established to basically support the dissemination of quality information throughout the kingdom, encouraging the private and public sector in implementing quality in their organizations, and to serve as a center of expertise. We established 2 branches thus far, one in the Eastern Province, one in Jazan, and hopefully, inshallah, this Saturday we will establish the third one in Medina, and we will go on establishing other branches throughout our beloved kingdom, so that those branches will be an extension of the society, so that we can do a more thorough job in expanding the knowledge about quality in the kingdom. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Mr. Donald James. He has more than 32 years of business experience in major US and European organizations. He is president and founder of Business Enterprise Mapping Company, which was established in 1993. Don has successfully implemented dozens of programs for business process improvement and certification to international standards. He authored several training materials for a variety of courses. Prior to founding the Business Enterprise Mapping, Don held positions in industry that included VP Engineering, Director of Operations, Director of Quality Assurance, and Director Advanced Manufacturing, and so on. So he has the business knowledge as well as the technical knowledge. And when both are in one person, that will be an excellent, really, something that will give more credibility to the concepts that Don will be talking about. The presentation will be intense. It will be full of information. It might take about 2 hours. So to manage the time, I would encourage everyone to defer questions till the end of the presentation. وإن شاء الله إحنا حنصلي مع بعض في نهاية العرض تقريبا حوالي الساعة 8:30 إن شاء الله. Without further ado, help me in welcoming Mr. Don James.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I'd like to also mention a few words. I really appreciate the honor of coming in front of this group. I came to Saudi over 18 months ago with AEC. I was invited over. And I was excited to come to your kingdom in the first place. And I basically fell in love with it over a very short period of time. And I think I was rather a pest at AEC because I wanted to see everything while I was here, while I was doing that work. So I intend to do that again this weekend too, by the way. The other thing that got me here was that it's warm. I spent a lot of time in Boston, Massachusetts, which is freezing, and so I've moved into Arizona. And our temperatures, right now, if you look at the temperatures in Arizona and here, so I said, I'm going to come, it's warm enough. So, however, I was here last time when it was I think it was 50 degrees Celsius, and that was a little bit too much for me. So we do have a lot of material to get through, and hopefully I can share some of those experiences. But one of the first things that struck me when I do travel around the world, I find excellence in places least expected, as I did at AEC. I have never seen a business management system so well developed by that group, and it was incredibly exciting, and to also have them invite me back. And in fact, I learned when I go into any business, I always learn when you see business excellence demonstrated, you learn. And I had a great experience at AEC, and I appreciate them for asking me back. So hopefully today's presentation, there will be a lot of information in there. I have this material on disk, and I will be giving some contact information. And we have a lot of examples and case studies also that I would love to share with you all. And if you leave us your information, I'd be very glad to supply that to you. I'll give you a link to a website and you can actually download that information. Did any of you watch the slides before we started? Was that an unusual group of problems? Some of you are nodding yes, some of them are not. But relocating llamas is actually a process. I will just let you know. And it may seem strange for you, but somebody decided to build a mine on top of a town, so they had to move the town as well as the livestock before they could start digging the hole. So that's why that was there. All right. What I'd like to do is quickly go through some of the topics that we're going to be covering. As I mentioned, or as was mentioned, I've spent a number of years doing many things, and 23 years ago, I decided to apply some of that learning when process development was in its infancy. There were very few organizations actually practicing it. So over the 23 years, we've learned a lot from working with wonderful clients like AEC and other clients that you saw there. But what I would like to focus on today really is about what we call business process improvement, BPI, if some of you, I'm sure, have heard of that expression, and also how it can be used, and there are various uses for it, and I certainly can't cover them in 2 hours, but I will probably give you a feel for them. Some of you may have started down the road to developing your business processes through some kind of flow charting or mapping, and it's not just the tool, it's also the program. And people say to me, you know, after we work with them, you know, we finished. And I say, no, you're just actually starting. You've defined your processes and you've defined your systems, and it's really not a destination. It really is a journey. And I've had the pleasure over the 23 years of doing this, working with a lot of wonderful companies and participating in that journey. One of the things, you know, we talk about is quality management, and many of the professionals here have worked in that arena, but what I've learned over the years is quality is changing. The quality is only a part of the solution. And, you know, when I used to go into companies and I used to talk to sales and marketing or finance, and ask them about their processes and corrective action and preventive action, they really didn't know what I was talking about. So a lot of the things we've been practicing as professionals really didn't reach all aspects of the company. It was really focused around manufacturing, or in some cases engineering, but the other aspects of the business were missed. And certainly from an industry perspective too. So as you saw from the materials, there was a very wide scope and a diverse scope of industries that we've worked with. So this presentation, we sort of geared it to you if you have a very solid interest in how to improve your business, and I'm sure we all have that interest, whether we own a business or we work in a business. Sometimes what we see is people very frustrated, in some cases, with the tools that they're using to improve the business. Many of the tools we see out there in the quality arena in particular are what we would call become obsolete, because our business in the quality management is moving more towards automation and mistake-proofing processes, but there's a huge need for the knowledge that's in quality and applied to other areas in the business. Also, we talk about processes, and you'll see a little later on, it's not about just process improvement. It really is enterprise improvement, and even going beyond that, improving governments, improving the global aspect of how businesses operate. So one of the things we'll talk about also is from an organization. So what are you going to get out of it, and what is your organization going to get out of it? Well, as I'm sure some of you have seen, there may be hundreds of processes within the business, and not only have you defined them, the second biggest issue is, are you following them? And another issue is, seldom are they connected. And many businesses we see are very much structured around what we would call the traditional organizational chart, versus really developing their business around the processes that they exist. Sometimes businesses approach us because they're just not meeting the performance or they're not growing fast enough. So how does business process improvement going to help them do that? Many businesses I go into are very tired of procedures and policies. And one of the reasons they're tired is because it's a very old tool, and it's not necessarily geared towards technology and information availability. People need access to information quickly, whether or not they have time to go and read manuals and business process manuals or procedures. That's one of the reasons why a lot of that information is stagnant in many cases and stays on the shelf. When I look at a business, I see it as a very complex engineering model made up of very complex processes that are interrelated with each other. Processes map is no different than an engineering schematic. And so when you see some of these maps, it literally is a schematic and a diagram of how the businesses operate and how they function together as processes and systems. Some companies approach us because they're about to install software, and one of the things that I've learned from software is when you integrate software, the steps are define what you do, simplify what you do, automate where you need to, integrate it into the enterprise, and then continuously improve it. Just like a quality management system, it needs to be continuously improved. New business acquisitions, how do you get two businesses to work together with different systems in place or different procedures in place? So when you, as you saw, some of the slides were devoted to business acquisition, where how do you come up with one culture or one methodology? Who's got the best practice? The company that you're acquiring or the company that's doing the acquiring? And also, more and more, we're seeing businesses that want to become industry leaders. The mine in Bolivia, for instance, it's a very hostile environment. It's a 12-hour drive from anywhere via dirt road. There are no roads. And when we started working with them, it was losing about $10 million a month, and it was basically on the verge of collapse. Now, members of the European Union actually travel there to see how they've done it in a very hostile environment. 80%, for instance, of the workforce don't even have a high school education. They're indigenous peoples, but they're smart. They have a brain, and given the right tools, they are extremely effective. So we've worked with a lot of businesses, and we've learned along the way. And not only have we worked with a lot of businesses, we've worked with a lot of businesses that have done many different things. And one of the things that they all have in common, they have processes and they have problems. Processes are very similar. In many businesses, they're almost identical, no matter what the product or service is. So getting an understanding of how processes operate in some cases more fundamental than getting the product out the door. Over those 300 businesses, we've pretty much addressed about 60 different industries and services. It's actually a little bit more than that. But one of our statistics, we keep data of how many processes we've worked with and participated with, and we also keep track of the opportunities. And there's been about 750,000 opportunities that we've uncovered. And I say we, I don't mean BM, I mean the experts. The experts, we believe, are already resident in the environment. Usually they don't have the tools necessary to be able to solve some of these complex business problems. Part of the statistics that we've been taking over the 22 years we've been doing this, we found the same root causes as you find in quality. The 5 root causes, as you know, are process, materials, people. The other one is the environment itself, and the tools and equipment we need to operate. But when we look at those statistics, we find overwhelmingly Pareto really works really well in practice, that 80% of these issues, nearly 80% of these issues are process related. And in some cases, people haven't defined their processes, and those are companies in chaos. Even if processes are in place, they're not owned. Somebody wrote a document, but they actually don't own the process. They don't own the physical things that are going out there in the manufacturing area or being a service provider. They're certainly not linked. We look at a process as a piece of the puzzle, and the things that will make the business succeed is not only have you got good processes, but how well they're connected together. The other thing that we see too is we see processes defined, even mapped. and then when we go out there and we look at the work being done, we actually don't see them being followed. Particularly at the end of the quarter when people are rushing to get products out the door, that's a sure sign that they actually will start or will go around processes. The other ones are not measuring the process, both in efficiency and effectiveness. Quality over the years is really focused on improving the product quality and service of the materials. But if the process is broken, the product's broken. It's just that simple. And if you don't measure both in terms of effectiveness and efficiency, then things start to run into trouble. You can still have very good products and services, but if your competitor is more efficient at getting those products and services out than you will lose market share. So both of them are important, and we found that you can actually have both of them. You don't have to sacrifice quality for efficiency or efficiency for quality. They are actually symbiotic. They work together. So where do we find problems? We find them in numerous places. Some of them are legacy problems. Some of them have been in place for the longest time. Many of these problems are not necessarily big in nature, but there's lots of them. People usually address the big problems, but there can be several thousand opportunities within a business. The other type that we see is through assessments, somebody coming in and kicking the tires of the business or the process, or through measurement and testing, and that's a big opportunity generator as well. Feedback from your customers via complaints, but unfortunately, that's too late. Once the problem has hit the customer, that's the kind of problem you certainly don't want to see. The other type that we're seeing now is using the process tools and the BPI tools, where we're getting people to actually look ahead to their future. For instance, quite often we see businesses that have a 5-year strategy, and I'll go into a business and say to them, what is your process going to look like 5 years from now? We don't know. So let me get this right. You've got a strategy and a vision of where you want the business to go, and you have no vision of what the process is going to look like 5 years from now. So process is not only about creating current conditions, it's also about designing the facility, the operation, the government of the future. Is how do you want it to operate 5 years from now? Certainly technology is playing a key role in business. We're seeing more and more businesses mistake-proofing their processes, repeating repetitive, non-value-added activities for humans and replacing them with automation. That allows human beings to focus on what we're really very good at. The indigenous people out in Bolivia with no high school education solved that facility's problems by using tools. They're very smart. They may not have a degree, but they're very smart people. And they want to solve that problem, and they want that mine to be very successful. People will sometimes refer to us as a consultant. If there are consultants in the room, I certainly don't want to insult anyone. But I believe our role as experts, subject matter experts, knowledge, our role really is to infuse that knowledge into the operation around us. It's a bit like teaching. I get a lot of satisfaction out of seeing processes and systems succeed, not doing it myself. These problems I've seen before, I can probably solve them, and once I walk out of the facility, if I don't instill that knowledge and training and education into the enterprise, then usually the problem will come back, and because I haven't left that knowledge behind. So I truly partner with clients, our business partners with clients, because I believe the expertise is already there. You just got to use it more effectively, provide people with training and education, and allow them to be successful. So if we had to look at those 300 businesses and 750,000 opportunities, we see 6 main uses of the tool of BPI. It's not just used in quality. One of the things I've already mentioned is to be a world-class enterprise, most admired. That means it's not you to have a great quality system, but you're extremely profitable, you're growing very rapidly, and you're contributing to the GDP of the country. It's about being world class. People wanted to come and see how you've done it. And I think every aspect, whether it's government or whether it's service or whether it's manufacturing, you can be world class. That should always be your goal. Performance problems. We go into businesses and they have their KPIs in place, profit, loss, are we growing? But they don't have the process metrics in place to understand why they're not growing. To understand, it's very late, as you know, KPIs, they're pretty straightforward in all businesses, but they're lagging indicators. The problem's already happened. So what we find is we don't find the right measurements in place that are meaningful to the people that are doing the job. And so they're accountable. And when you hold people accountable and you give them measurements that they're accountable to, they will perform. Processes are doing better than people usually think. But you have to start somewhere. And if you don't have the right measurements, there's a leaf out of the quality book. If you're not measuring it, you're not improving it. If you're not measuring it, you're not managing it. Regulatory compliance is another area. We've seen good, bad, and ugly, which I'm sure you all have. So this one wants to stay with me. So I think you've seen good, bad, and ugly in terms of compliances. The ugly can be lots of procedures, lots of SOPs, standard operating procedures, and policies that really don't benefit the business. I think I'm going to lose this guy in a minute. So, okay. It may have come with me. Sorry. One of the first uses back in '93 of this tool was when ISO 9001 came out, which was really a lot of the foundation of a business management system is tied up in the quality management system. Quality really looked at many aspects of the business, not all of them. And back then, it was taking probably 2 years to implement compliance to a standard, whether it be safety or whether it be environmental standards. And it was a very painful journey that I undertook, and I thought there had to be a better way of doing this. So I'm going to have to, this is really annoying me. I thought there would be a better way of doing it, and one of the things that we applied this to was ISO 9001, a client, one of our first clients, and they'd heard about all of the procedures and policies that companies have put in. They'd heard about, they didn't get really a lot of value out of it, and so they didn't want to do it because of the certificate. They wanted to do it to improve their business. And in fact, I always remember the president, when the auditor came in and they said, we want you to look at our financial management system. We wanted you to look at our marketing and sales. The auditor said, well, we don't audit those. And the president turned around and said, I want you to, because that's a part of my business too. That company had 0 non-conformances. It took them about 4 months before they invited the auditor in. So they were extremely successful because the president was committed. And as you know from the standards, if you've ever read them, I knew the difference between commitment and support. The old standards used to talk about supporting the process. Now, the president was absolutely committed to it. Software integration is a big use of this, is understanding the processes before you put automation in place to make sure that the tool is useful for the user, not that somebody puts in a tool and then you have to figure out to use it, which is the case that we see. For every $10 spent on the solution, it costs about $100 to actually get it to work in a business. And we see a lot of that. Rapid growth. We see a lot of cases where when you're a small business, where you have a lot of dedicated individuals that have a stake in the business, pretty much people will do anything to get that business running. But as they start to scale up, the infrastructure collapses, and they just don't have the infrastructure in place to continue to grow profitably. The last one I mentioned earlier, which is acquisitions. How do you bring a new business into the environment? How do you ensure that your standards and vision and your culture are embedded in the new business? Or, in some cases, when you acquire a company, you actually may acquire best in class. So you don't want your talent to lose, you don't want to lose your talent, and you also want to be able to identify the processes that are better than yours, and you want to adopt them as quickly as possible. So if we examined all of the companies that we've done business for, those are the 6 main areas why people want to adopt the tools. Businesses are not just faced with quality issues, they're faced with many issues. We talked about dynamic growth. How do you keep skilled people in place as the company grows, or a company next door starts poaching your staff? And that's all right. Okay. So one of the things that we've done is that our program has pretty much evolved as we touch businesses, see those solutions, seeing best practice in place. We learn very, very rapidly from that. So it's not just a BPI is just one thing. It's not just mapping. There are many things and many aspects to it. And so what we've tried to do as we've learned, we've continuously built that in. When I came back from AEC last time I was here, they did something very special. And one of the things I asked their permission if I can adopt their best practice. And when I got off the plane on a Monday, I went about changing a lot of our materials. So continuous improvement is immediate. So when you see it, when you see best practice, you adopt it, you enhance it, and you bring it into the fold. This is how businesses see themselves. And that's not to take it away from the leadership team. When a business is very profitable and growing rapidly, one of the assumptions is that things are going well, and so we must be good, so we must have good practices. But when we go in there, we don't see seamless enterprises. What we do is we see superheroes. We see people working late. We see people working at weekends. And if they actually went home on time, that business would not be doing as well. So the business relies upon superheroes to keep it going. However, it's very easy to say we must be successful because we're growing and we're profitable. But the question is, how much more can you grow? We go into businesses that are very happy with 25% growth, and they've done it over 5 years. Apple would not be interested in a 25% growth. The question is how capable and what are your processes and systems, and how much can you grow? Why would you come up with an arbitrary limit? What's your capability to grow? Many businesses we go into don't know that. So somebody sets a goal in place, and you have a whole bunch of superheroes driving very hard to meet those goals and objectives. In many cases, when you ask them where the goal came from, they'll say, well, their competitors got that goal, so we adopted it. So they don't even understand what their capabilities to excel at. So reality for us is when we look at all aspects of the business, not just the quality organization, but purchasing, human resources, they have a role in that business. And the old silo approach, where it's very much regimented around command and control and organization, it doesn't work. And when you go in and look at the processes and you talk to the experts, you realize very quickly that departments are separated. They don't talk to each other. They don't communicate. In many cases, they don't know who the internal customers are. If you talk to engineering, for instance, they would say that their customer is the end customer. They wouldn't say that manufacturing is their customer. They just wouldn't. They believe that their solution is what is sold. But if you don't manufacture it properly, it's not reliable, you will lose your business very, very rapidly. So that customer-supplier relationship is absolutely key, whether it's at a process, a system, or an enterprise level. So work does not flow vertically, it flows horizontally. It flows across the organization. And we go into companies all the time that would call themselves marketing-driven or engineering-driven companies. What they're basically saying is they're more important than everyone else. That business would not function. I often ask people, how long would you stay in the business if you didn't get paid? and it wouldn't be very long. Or you don't look after your talent, you look after your people. So business processes touch many aspects of the business. IT provides solutions, it provides information. So how does that integrate with the enterprise? You know, sales-driven companies, you know, if you didn't have sales, you wouldn't have a business. So therefore, I'm more important. But if you sell something and you can't build it, you can't maintain it, then you might as well have not sold it in the first place. That is obvious to many of us, but show me that. Show me that a seamless enterprise that coordinates all those processes and systems together to ensure that the vision of the company is met on a consistent basis. And if the vision is not being met, what are you going to do to adjust your business processes and systems to meet those goals and objectives? You want the mic? I just didn't want to... So no one can hear me? Is that better? Maybe nobody wants to hear me. Is that better? Can you hear me now? Okay, good. I don't like screaming. Although I do scream when I did my parachute jump. I did that. I did scream very loudly. So business processes flow horizontally. And when businesses run into trouble, quite often we see people playing musical chairs or arranging the deck chairs on the deck of the ship while it's sinking. The processes are there. They're always there. And the one thing you have in common, all businesses have in common, you've got people that really want to do a good job. What you have to figure out is what's preventing them from doing the job that they really want to do. They want to be successful. They want the business to be successful. But quite often we find businesses just arranging the deck chairs. They'll bring in one manager because the system is not effective, and they replace them. And there's a 50% chance that they will not be as effective as the previous person running the organization. Some cases, you bring in people to make change, and they make change without understanding best practice that's already there. We find best practice, as I said earlier, in the most unlikely places. Small companies, big companies. And if you don't understand your processes and you don't understand what's working well, you have a huge risk of making it worse. So business improvement is also about recognizing what's working well, just like it's about what needs to be improved. Some of the challenges we see in the organization structure, the command and control structure, where you have very few people making the decisions versus really delegating that knowledge, experience, and expertise in the thousands of people that may work in the business. So I've already mentioned the biggest problem is that silo mentality. You're organized around those castles, in some cases, fiefdoms. My fiefdom is bigger than your fiefdom. And you're struggling and arguing over budgets, but it all comes out of the same pot. Unclear accountability. I mentioned earlier, many of the measurements we see in place are not meaningful, certainly to the process, and certainly not to the system. People put in measurements without understanding the products that they produce. So how can you measure the quality of the product that you produce if you don't understand what it is? I often talk to procurement, if there's anyone in procurement here, and I would say, who's the customer to procurement? And they say, well, the requester. And I would say, no, the requester supplies you information, so it's an input to your process. What is your output? And they'll say, well, a purchase order. And I'll say, well, who gets it? And they'll say the requester. I said, no, the requester doesn't manufacture the product for you. Who gets it? And eventually they'll say, well, the vendor. And then I'll ask the question again. I'll say, who's your customer? And they'll say, the requester. No, the product is the PO. It better be accurate. It better be timely. And the vendor better be able to understand it so you can provide the goods and service. But that's not the relationship we see between procurement and vendors. It's very hostile. The relationship is very poor. Some companies we see wonderful relationships where the vendor is actively participating and treated as a partner in the enterprise. The one that I see very often, you've got a dedicated vendor that's been working with you for 15 years. They've got tremendous quality and service. They've been reducing their price because they're becoming more efficient, and yet you will still ask them to bid as one of 3 bids on a project. So you talk about loyalty. That undermines loyalty very rapidly. So what kind of relationship do you have? We talked about those disconnects, and disconnects not only externally but also internally. The processes, you may have them mapped, or you may have procedures in place, but they just don't connect. It's like a plug and socket. Your processes need to connect seamlessly together. I look at it like Lego bricks. You may have 100 processes. You put those Lego bricks seamlessly together to create a product or service. Unpredictable outcomes. That comes as a result of lack of control. The basic controls that we would want to see in existence for an engineering project or a mechanical project, those controls are the same controls in a business environment, and they're absent. They're completely absent. They just don't exist. Feedback, as you know, if you're an engineer, is essential for stability and predictability. We'll often see processes with no feedback. They would often say that no news is good news. No, it isn't. If you're a vendor, no news is not good news. They're out looking. They've not given you any feedback. They've not given you any opportunity to improve, but you haven't met their objectives, so they're going to find another vendor. So they move the chairs on the ship again, the deck chairs on the ship. Reactive firefighting. That's a commonplace. I once had a president, after taking a phone call from a customer, and they were pretty irate. It was a customer that was pretty upset. They knew the president very well. The president walked into the quality director's office, which happened to be mine, and basically they wanted me to drop what I was doing to work on that issue. That issue was the known issue in our business. It was issue number 54. I actually asked the president, what would you like me to do with the other 53 while I'm fixing number 54? That was not a very good career move. But that's what we're faced with. Reacting to problems. Six Sigma, as much as I learn a lot from Six Sigma, it's a firefight team in many cases. You have a small group of individuals that basically stand by the red phone and wait for it to ring. Or they focused on big issues. There are no big issues in many companies. There's lots of small issues. And you can't solve them with a central group. You have to distribute that knowledge amongst everyone in the business. So you give them the tools. So you don't have 3 or 4 people working on the problem. You've got 2,000 people working their problems in a preventive way in the business. Non-value added work. This is, I think I see a lot. When I go into business and look at the tasks and processes, I actually look at the value-added activities. And quite often, I would say that you're doing extremely well if 50% of them are value-added. Quite often, we find less than 20% value-added activities, repetitive work, mindless work, more testing, more checking, less focus on preventing the problem. When I say to them, aren't you analyzing your metrics? And they'll say, we don't have time. We are so busy trying to get the product out the door. So we don't have time to get better. That is not an excuse. That should never be an excuse. It's a matter, if you don't have all the resources, which ones do you work on first? Many of my clients, I will say to them, you know, how do you eat an elephant? And it's very simple, one piece at a time. It's that simple. You've got to understand what your opportunities are and focus on the ones that are impacting you most. Not just on an enterprise level, but in your process, in your system. And if you start doing that and you engage 2,000 members of your workforce, you have a very powerful problem-solving team. We've adopted a measurement system. We've not necessarily invented this. We had this in place nearly 20 years ago before things like CMMI came along. And we would look at a business in terms of the 5 levels. And we've seen companies at all of these levels. If any of you have gone to Los Angeles or Silicon Valley, we encountered a lot of them about 20 years ago, and it was called the dot-com companies. And they had no processes in place, they had no procedures in place, and you actually didn't know how they ever got anything out the door. And in fact, many of them never did, and they failed very rapidly. Most businesses that we go into, probably in the order of 95% of them are level 2 businesses. I do not care how much profit and how you measure success. We have a check sheet that we actually look at these very specific things. Have you got your processes defined? Are they owned? Have you got metrics in place? Do you review the performance on a periodic basis of your processes and systems? And we just don't find them in place. So they're reactive. They may have their processes defined, but they're not always following them, they may not be measuring them, and they're certainly not in a state of control. Our first goal, working with businesses and using the methodology, is to put them in a controlled state, predictable state. That means most of the people are following the process most of the time, and that's all I can hope for. Being an engineer, sometimes good enough is good enough, but if we're all on board and working in the same direction, our processes are consistently followed and measured, it's actually very easy to isolate the problems and the root of the problems. One of the issues we find is if you're not following the process and it's not consistent, you get unpredictable outcomes. And it's very difficult to get to the root of the problem. So this may sound crazy, but I would rather work with a poor performing process that's consistent than the best process that's not consistent. The reason being, the problem is consistent and it's very easy to isolate. It's unpredictable outcomes that are extremely difficult. It worked last month and it's not working this month. And it causes people to react. Level 4 business, after they're in a state of control, they actually can establish goals because now they know where their benchmark is. And it may not be perfect, it may only be 80% of where they want to be. But next year they have a goal of making a 90%. The year after that, 95%. The year after that, 97%. And you know what we see is we see them performing. We see them actually achieving those goals in a very systematic way. And it's not the 99.999%. It's not 0 defects. It's all about closing the gap. It's this year, I'm better than I was last year. That's what it's about. When I see companies that are able to establish goals and meet them, I don't care how low the goals are, but if they're meeting them, they're demonstrating to me that they can actually drive the car anywhere they want to. It's not a matter of driving around the track at 250 miles an hour. It's a matter of getting the car to drive around the track and then start to improve. Best-in-class companies, there are not very many of those. I've only encountered 2 of them in my career. Only 2 out of the 300. Very, very small number. And the questions I ask there is, show me your processes, show me your vision of the company and strategy, and show me how your processes meet that strategy. Businesses spend less than 1 hour a month organizing, reviewing strategy. Less than 1 hour. That's where the leadership should be. And where the leadership's spending their time is reacting like many of us used to. And they're fighting fires. So they don't have time to work on strategy. But the differentiator here is when a business understands its processes and they link it to the strategy and the vision of the leadership team, it's a very powerful combination. So many strategies fail because of the inability to execute it in a consistent manner. Sometimes I look at strategies, I said, when was the last time you reviewed your strategic performance? Well, we review it on an annual basis. Well, that's not good enough. How do you know you're meeting your strategic goals? What happens if you have to adjust them? Maybe you were wrong. Maybe there's a better way. So how are you going to do that? Looking at it on an annual basis is not good enough. So one of the tools that we use, and I'm sure you use it too, is something called a process map, and that's evolved too. However, particularly in certain industries, we still find people writing policies and procedures. Every time I see those, I think of somebody writing on stone tablets with a chisel. That's literally how I see it. Many of those old tools will not automate very easily. I can't see a schematic when I look at a procedure. Can't see it. I certainly can't see how the procedure connects to the other procedures in the business. Many companies I walk into, their procedures reference every other procedure they can think of in the procedure. Symbols came along. Many of us software engineers started using symbols as a means to describe very easily the software we were writing. Also, engineers used to use it for project management, and it's a great tool, but it's not good enough. It's very basic. Swim lane came along, which is the next level, which is all about structuring your business processes. And those swim lanes, however, they were structured around organization and not around systems and processes. True process maps really are a vision and a picture of what your business and how it operates. It tells you what happens, when it happens, who's responsible, why it happens. Doesn't tell you how it happens. Maps work with how-tos. How-tos either are walking around your facility because they're knowledgeable experts, or in some cases you do need to know how to make a cup of coffee, and it has to be written down. Where business is going into workflow. We see it everywhere. The step function from some of these earlier methods are just too great. They're just not capable of describing what you need in workflow. If you haven't automated yet, one of the things you have to do is understand what you currently have in place. Process maps can allow you to do that. So I'm not here to insult the quality organization. That's the last thing I want to do. I've been a member of the ASQC for many years in America. It's a wonderful organization, and it's put a lot of investment into industry, and it's moved industry a long way. But it hasn't touched some aspects of the industry, as we talked about. The direction is business management. Leadership are not always interested in quality. They're interested in other things. However, business management should be all of those things. When I look at a business, it's not about just quality of the product or service. It's about how quick you can produce it, how cost-effective you can do it, and ultimately, are you satisfying the needs of your immediate customer? There's no rocket science there. But it's not just about quality. It's also about those other organizations that we've not touched very well. People like HR, for instance. I mentioned sales, I mentioned marketing, I mentioned finance. Finance has controls. Sometimes they are also procedures and policies. They're not fully integrated into the process world. So moving towards a leaner, more versatile organization is where businesses are going. They have to survive. Businesses can come and go very rapidly in this day and age. And it's really a competition, ultimately, is how quickly do you improve. If you improve faster than your competition, you will be incredibly successful. It's a matter of improvement. So when we talk about process management, I don't see it like that. I see a bigger picture. I see people working very hard on the tasks that they do. A group of tasks create processes. Those processes revolve around systems, and there are 12 systems in an enterprise. That's the thing we discovered, that no matter what you do, no matter what service you produce, you basically have 12 systems in place. Those 12 systems make up your enterprise, and then your systems and your enterprises work together to form a community of enterprises. Now, how do you see that? Well, we see it in government. We work with government institutions where they have a community of businesses that they're responsible for. Whether it's the environment, whether it's the Department of Transportation, those business systems have to work together in harmony, and they serve the community directly. All business enterprises serve the community. So quite often, you've heard the old tune, what goes around comes around. It's basically true. So we are here working very hard in our activities in the business that form processes, that form systems, that form enterprises. Ultimately, that community of enterprises, whether it's Riyadh or Saudi Arabia, are there to return value to the community. So it's a big circle. So when you talk about business process improvement, it's not just about processes. It's about systems. It's about the enterprise. Structure. Foundational. Understand the structure of a business enterprise. And the structure is very shallow. Organizational structure, we've gone into companies that have the C-suite, then they have the senior vice presidents, and then they have the vice presidents, and then they have the senior directors, they have the directors, they have the senior managers, the supervisors, and then the rest of us. Okay? And that's a command and control structure. If there is one enterprise, there is only one owner of that enterprise. It's the president. They're responsible, ultimately, for the direction of that business. Those 12 systems, and some of them you're probably familiar with. We've named some of them. Yes, there's operations and manufacturing, there's design, there's IT, there's finance. There's 12 of them. Quality has its own system. The quality management system is one of the key elements to ensure that the enterprise is continuously improving. And then you've got the leadership structure that sits on that. Processes, it varies. Some businesses are more complex than others. I've seen up to 200 processes. Typically, it's around 100. And the slimmer the processes, the easier it is to control. But it really does depend, processes, it really does depend upon the complexity of the products and services that you're providing. But it's not thousands. It's not thousands of procedures. There's a very limited number. There may be thousands of activities that sit under those processes, because a process is a group of activities with a common goal. And in the case of the purchasing or procurement, the common goal is ensuring that we find really good vendors, we onboard them successfully, we pay them on time, we nurture them, and we keep them for a very long time. We never want to see them go. We want to see them grow with us. It's a bit like people when you see the HR systems. I go into companies all the time, and I'll ask the head of HR, what's your main process? And they'll say benefits. And they'll say payroll. And then I say, well, where's your processes that are devoted to developing and sustaining your people? Oh, well, you're going to have to go to the hiring managers for that, because we're not responsible. So I'll often say, which hiring manager do I go to that's responsible for developing the culture of this company? So this structure is very important. It's very simple. And there's a lot of, and it's not hierarchical. To be a process owner, you don't have to be a manager. The best process owners I've ever encountered in industry are shipping and receiving clerks. Anybody got an idea why that is? Why do I find dedicated process owners in shipping and receiving? One is they don't allow bad stuff to come into your business, and they take a lot of pride in that. And B, the last person touching your product is your shipping. How your product looks is not necessarily inside the box, it's actually what the box looks like. And they are very dedicated to make sure that that product goes out on time and it meets specification. So it's not based upon hierarchy. Process owners, it's all about people, getting people to work together. If any of you follow soccer, which I think you do, right? You like soccer. You like the Premier League. A lot of talent. I stopped supporting England in 1989 when they were playing Cameroon, and I think it was 2 weeks before Cameroon actually acquired soccer boots. And they nearly beat England, because it's a bunch of superheroes running around the pitch wanting to take the glory and not working as a team. So the essential elements. Here's some of the essential elements to a BPI program. Having a model, whether it be a 12-part model or an 18-part model, but somebody has a vision of what these processes look like and what families that they belong to. The families are very obvious. in many cases. Sales and marketing, their responsibility is developing customers. Purchasing, I've already mentioned. IT is responsible for ensuring information is readily available when people need it and it's accurate. System management, there are system owners. System owners are usually members of the leadership team. Their main goal is to be leaders. That means that they make sure the orchestra is playing together. You need a band leader. Typically, it is a member of the leadership team because they have experience, they have knowledge, they've been maybe working there a while, and they're accountable. But their primary mission is to ensure the process owners are successful. If the process owners are successful and they're all pulling in the same direction, the system will be incredibly successful. And it encourages that team. The weakest link in a system is the weakest process. And it's not a matter of pointing the fingers. What you'll see people doing is actually helping other process owners. Sometimes process owners have the unfortunate experience of being the last person in the food chain, and when problems occur, they're the ones that it usually propagates to. So you're seeing process owners working together to actually ensure the system is efficient and effective, not necessarily that their own process is efficient and effective. The other thing I mentioned earlier is about knowing who your customers. So when you connect those processes, and they connect a very specific way within your business, it's understanding that relationship that you have with your immediate customer. If you don't know who they are, you certainly will not satisfy them. That's just as simple as that. If you don't know what products and services that you deliver, whether it be intellectual or physical, you will not succeed. You will not meet the customer's expectations. If you're not working with them to continuously improve, you will not get better. So one of the things that we've seen as critical, and this is a learning experience for us, it wasn't something that we invented, we found it, where you have really good relationships between processes. 20% of the issues in a business are boundary issues. Boundary issues are issues between systems and processes. Boundary issues can also be where two enterprises basically kiss, just like a billiard ball. They kiss each other, they're up close. So it's critical that you understand the needs of your immediate customer, otherwise you will never meet the level of satisfaction. If you can't meet the needs of the internal customer, you will never, ever satisfy the needs of the external customer. It's just not possible. Now, you've got your superheroes still in place. Tools and methods that people can use. You know, a lot of the quality management tools we use. We find Ishikawa diagrams. We use those. Many companies we go into, you'll go into HR, or you go into finance, or you go into sales, and if you said Ishikawa diagram to them, they would like, what the heck is that? That's the quality group. That's what they do. We don't do that stuff. That's not. If you say, well, what are your 5 root causes? They'll tell you, well, why didn't you say so in the first place? It's process, it's people, it's materials. Oh, okay. Let's call it something different then. So the tools that we've been using a long time are just not utilized effectively. You know, lean, for instance, what's value added? They don't know. I often will go and use the expression, paper's evil. It is. It's evil stuff. It has to be handled, moved, stored, and yet the information is on your ERP system. You can print it any time you want to, but you have to print it out. In some cases, we print it out because we have to sign a piece of paper. Well, why do you have to sign a piece of paper? There's electronic signatures. Oh no, our auditors said we have to physically sign it. Well, my wife signed many legal documents for me while I was away. And in fact, the only time I got queried on the signature is when I signed something because it didn't look like my wife's signature. It's a true story. So there's other ways to ensure that people review and approve. And there's other techniques, and let's get with the times. There's fingerprints. My iPhone. Nobody can get into my iPhone unless I put my fingerprint on it. So how do I know that you did that? That's usually an auditor's question. How do you know that I did that? Well, in some cases, I actually trust people that work in my business. That's how I know they did it, and they wouldn't move the product out the door unless they tested it. Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that if they just signed a piece of paper? They still may not have tested the product. So it's trust. I trust people until proven otherwise. It's not that I'm stupid. I trust people, but I measure. You know, I've had auditors saying, oh, they've got worse. Well, why? Well, we found all these non-conformances. Okay, have you looked at their metrics? What do you mean? Well, their customer satisfaction last year was 4.0, it's now 4.4. Their on-time delivery time has gone up from 95 and now it's 98. Their cost of their product has been reduced by 20%. So what do you mean they've got worse? Well, we found several documents that were not signed off. It's irrelevant. If you've got effective measurements in place, that's your dashboard. And if you trust those measurements and your employees trust them, you will get remarkable results. And that's no dig on auditors here, by the way. I'm an auditor. I'm a lead auditor. And I believe the value of an audit is essential in a quality management system. It's called self-assessment. Somebody else kicking the tires to make sure it's effective, not just you. But sometimes auditors lose sight of who the customer is. And when I often say to them, well, who'd you give the audit report to? And they say, we give it to management. Well, are management going to fix that process? No. What they do is react and scream at people to fix the process. Well, why don't you talk to the people first about what opportunities that exist? If you can engage them, they will solve the problem. You've got to engage them. And also delivery. If we didn't have a process, we'd be in trouble. And that was awkward about 22 years ago when a company said, okay, you're telling us to document processes. Can you show me one of yours? And I said, I haven't documented them. So I fixed that problem very rapidly. So you're going to have a process. It's a journey. It starts with understanding where you are. It ends with where you're going. And there's a very systematic process in place to get there. Unfortunately, we've all seen initiatives come and go, whether it be zero nonconformances or Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma or very, 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 very Lean Six Sigma. They come and go. They have a lifespan. Your processes are there. They'll always be there for you. Everything we do in life is a process. Everything. And they're always there. And the goal is 70 to 80% of your issues is to make those processes work well together. So the enterprise model, we talked about the 12 systems, and this is how they basically are structured. You have the leadership system, which is strategy and management review, as we've seen it. They own the KPIs and the performance of their enterprise. The 5 resource-based process, or 5 resource-based systems, which is finance, facilities, equipment, people, and information technology. The core, obviously, is the most important group in terms of getting the product. The core touches the customers and suppliers external to the business. And you have your creativity through design and development. You have your operations that are responsible for turning raw materials into finished products. You have customers that you need to go find, and you want loyal customers. So you have a process or systems that are devoted to doing that. Procurement we talked about, and then service. We're not perfect. In fact, human beings are about 89% perfect. We're about 11% on our best day. We are not very good at repetitive tasks. So service provides a feedback mechanism in many cases. Improvement, let's not leave that out. The quality organization is not responsible for the quality of the entire business, but they are responsible for the tools and the education to make sure that those principles are embedded into all of the other systems. Non-conformance for us is a feedback mechanism that says your products are not meeting expectations. What do you do to evaluate them, to look for the root causes and prevent them from happening again? Process improvement is about making the processes more efficient. Internal assessment we've talked about. So those are the processes within that system. We talked about earlier about processes. This is a system diagram. This is a diagram of finance, a very typical financial management system. But you also need a tool for the leadership team. So this is their schematic. They work at a higher level. They're most interested in the connectivity between the systems, between the processes. They're also very interested in making sure the system itself is performing, whether it be HR or IT or whether operations, that the systems are efficient and effective. So you can make this up basically by taking the puzzle pieces and just seeing how they fit. And many companies that I go into, when I develop for that for the first time, they say that's not right. And I said, okay, show me yours. They don't. They can't. First time they've seen it. I actually go through an exercise with the leadership team sometimes, and we look at the five core, which is the service, maintenance, operations, design, purchasing, and sales. I say connect them. It takes them about half an hour to figure out how they connect. It's not because they're not stupid, it's just they've never done that before. They've never had to do that because they think organization, they think vertically. Nobody's asked them to see how they actually interact. And after I've done that, I say which process or which system is more effective? Which one's the most important one? And then they realize that it looks like that. Which one is the most important one? The most important one is the system. And you need to make sure the orchestra's playing together. That's the most important thing you have to focus on. SIPOC, how many people have heard of that model, SIPOC? Yeah, some of us, right? It's been around for years. It's not our claim to fame either. But the question is, are you really following it? This model fits at a task level, it fits at a process level, it fits at a system level, and it fits at the enterprise level. It fits at the Saudi level. Very simply, what comes into your country and what goes out? What does your country create of value? What raw materials do you get from suppliers around the globe? It applies. Same model. Do you really know who your immediate customers are at a task level, process level, or system level? Do you have an agreement in place? It's almost like a service level agreement. Do you have an understanding of what the requirements are to meet your needs? If you don't know who the customer is, you can't satisfy them. Also the feedback. How do you get feedback? Closed loop system. SIPOC is an open loop system. It needs feedback. It needs control. And the four principal measurements of any task, process, or system are the four basic measurements. You can compare apples and apples at a task, system, or process level by measuring simple things: speed, quality, cost, and satisfaction. It's the same measurements. So when companies say to me, well, how can we compare processes because they did make different products? Not at a process level, they don't. It's a product. It's a service. It's the same. So when people talk about mapping, it's not just about the process map. That's just here. Somebody asked me today about the RACI. They were looking at implementing 27001. It's very important to understand RACI, which is responsible, authorized, consulted, and informed. You should be able to get that information from a matrix in the back of the map. So maps are not just about the process. It's really replacing the book of information, the book of knowledge. The cover of this book is all about, if I wanted to see what's inside this process, I can see it in one screen, or if you want to print that out, it is a piece of paper, which is evil. The second page tells me, if I looked past the first, it's almost the chapters of the book. It says, here are the critical things that our process does. And this is basically the sequence. Here are my major customers, and here are the critical suppliers that give me stuff. Whether it's physical or intellectual, they give me stuff. They give me data, they give me information, they give me widgets, they give me nuts and bolts, but you know who they are. The process map really is the third aspect. It's really the detail you need to execute the process seamlessly. The last thing at the back is what we call the matrices. The matrices are the analytics. Maps are used. They are not shelfware. They're used to solve problems. They're used by other organizations, regulatory auditors, human resources, because it contains the information that they need, not just the process needs, but what they need. One company I went into, their HR department looked at the map and they said, well, you know, you've only got 55 roles and responsibilities. I said, yeah, that's kind of what we found. You know, here's the capabilities we found within your business. They had 500 on file. I said, but there's only 300 people working in your company. So they had all these titles for people. And I said, why do you have all these titles? Well, sometimes we can't pay them enough money, so we give them a title. And sometimes somebody will say to me, well, I can't tell you who this does because the manager does it, the stockroom clerk does it, and the production planner does it. I said, well, why do they do it? Well, when the stockroom guy goes on vacation, they do the work. Then you talk to the stockroom guy and said, do you like going on vacation? They say, no. And they said, why? Because my manager takes over from me. He's not capable, and I have to undo what he's been doing for the last 2 weeks. Because they're not capable. Now, that doesn't mean saying managers are not capable, because managers may have done that job, and they've done it extremely well. But when HR looks at roles and responsibilities, they look at a title in that organizational chart. They're not looking and understanding what capabilities really need to exist to operate that task in an appropriate manner. By the way, I will be giving you that material, so you'll actually see some of those examples. And if I put that up here, we would spend a lot of time on it, so I'm not going to do that. So if you looked at this journey to be best in class, that's a journey we want on. And it doesn't take a week, by the way. It doesn't take 90 days either. It takes years. It's a journey. It's not something that you expect results in 90 days and all of a sudden we're going to be a wonderful company. That is not going to happen. It's a matter of solving those problems. It's a matter of having a vision of the future. But it happens in stages. One of the things we look at is understanding what the systems and processes exist through phase 0. It's basically a roadmap. What do you look like? Phase 1 is about really mapping those processes. And we use owners to do that. We identify process owners. Process owners are the most valuable asset within the business. If you can't get the owners on board, the processes will not work. So part of that journey is understanding the processes, defining them, and also understanding the opportunities that exist. Phase 2 is really about deploying them. That means getting the people to follow it most of the time. And that's phase 2. And you exit phase 2 by being in a state of control. Phase 3 is where you go beyond just current state. Phase 3 is about looking a vision of the future. Where do you want your business processes to be 5 years from now? And if you actually ask the experts, you don't have to always ask consultants. You actually ask the people that do the job, what's your vision of the future? What would you like to see here? You'll be surprised on what the answers you get. In many cases, they're prevented from reaching that state because people don't listen to them. If you really listen to them, they'll tell you not only the problem, they'll actually give you the solution. Phase 4 for us is really upping the ante. Now we start working with the system owners, and the primary objective of the system owners is to make sure the processes are effective and efficient. The last phase, phase 5, is really putting the head on the body. You put the leadership elements, the strategy on top of the means to execute it. And what that means for the business as you migrate through that is you achieve those various levels. Best in class is you know, that's a great destination, but you may not necessarily be interested in that. However, I will tell you this, the return on investment is exponential. It's exponential. Once you get a process up and running, it's a huge return, 5 to 1 maybe. 5 to 1 return on investment. If you get a system up and running, it's 100 to 1 return on investment. If you get the enterprise all working together, it can be many thousands to 1 return on investment. It's exponential. However, we don't always have the patience to go the distance. That's a reality too. That controlled state I talked about, that level 3 is a big boundary. For us, it's like passing go. Did you pass go? That means you've defined your process, you demonstrated you're following them, and they're in a state of control. And you can actually show me evidence of that. But when people say to me, you know, we are higher than that, I say, well, have you got your processes defined? They go, yeah, here they are. Good. Are they owned? Where's the name on the bottom of that process? Like a schematic. Who owns it? May not be there. Engaged. That means people are actually following the process. You have two choices in a process-based structure. Only two choices. You follow the process or you make it better. You don't have any choice about going around it. If you don't like it, go talk to the process owner. And if your idea is better than what's currently in place, then a good process owner will adopt it rapidly. But you don't go around it. That customer alignment, making sure that we have those agreements in place between those processes. You've benchmarked it. That means you've gotten real metrics in place now, and you've created a level where you are. Once you do that, you can start putting in goals and objectives. Measurement and analysis, you've just started. I don't care how many measurements on your dashboard, on your process. I just want one. Show me one. If it's meaningful measurement, you start there. Also, when you go through the process and you start defining it, you also want to capture the opportunities. Most processes will have 30 to 40 business opportunities associated with them. A company may have several thousand of those opportunities. Process owners will identify them, prioritize them, and categorize them, and they will be on the map. That's a little frightening to auditors. And that's frightening to business owners, that you're telling me that you're going to tell the auditor what our problems are. Yes. Well, that's not going to go down too well. We need to hide them. No, you don't. The auditor's looking for opportunities that you haven't found. The only viable question that the auditor has, if you found the opportunity, is if you've done something that's drastically bad, and you shouldn't be doing it, which I doubt that you have in place, but they will ask you about what you're doing to improve it. And the answer could be nothing. Why? Because it's not a priority right now. Or we don't have a budget right now, and we ain't touching that sucker. We got 53 other ones that are more important. The other thing is reviewing against goal. Now, a new process in particular, many standards will talk about they must review the process at least periodically. When you ask what periodically means, it means probably around 12 months. That's absolutely crazy. A brand new processes you should be looking at regularly, at least monthly. Once you start demonstrating control, then you can ease it up. It could be quarterly, but you certainly don't want to do it periodically on an annual basis. I love it when I go into a company and I see Rev A on a document. When was that written? About 25 years ago. What happened to Rev B? No Rev B yet. Who was the person that wrote this, left the company 25 years ago? So they change rapidly. Every day, clients that we go into, their process owners will put the process up on the wall and they'll hang a red pen from it. And one day you'll see red marks on that map because somebody's taken the time and trouble to say, hey, there's an opportunity here. And if it's serious enough, the process owner will incorporate the solution very rapidly after analyzing it. And that's important. Einstein said once that if I had a problem to solve and it took me an hour, I'd spend 55 minutes analyzing the problem. I'd spend less than 5 minutes solving it. So if you want to compare what we've seen, and as I said, don't get me wrong, that's where I was 20-odd years ago. The first system that I documented, I used SOPs. But business process improvement is here to stay. And it's growing ground very rapidly, and it's the right thing to do. It's not an option, it's the right thing to do. And I'm not going to go down the list. You can read as well as I can. But what we're seeing is companies transitioning to their organizations based upon processes and systems and enterprise. Not just a single group of people responsible for the quality, but that quality knowledge is embedded throughout the enterprise. You've got 2,000 problem solvers. You don't just have a unique group of people solving the problem. I believe quality professionals, I think their talents are totally wasted by day-to-day management of a process or satisfying the auditor. I think their talents are just too great to waste that on. They need to pass that knowledge on to the users. Then they need to educate the system owners. And they need to then be working with the C-suite. Too often, I see quality professionals reporting to the Vice President of Operations. They're not reporting to the President. That needs to change. Because they have knowledge and experience the rest of the company needs. When I see the playing field, you know, and I see Six Sigma out there. Many of us are Six Sigma black belts. I'm a Six Sigma super duper master black belt, or whatever it is. And one of those, whatever it is. The playing field is a very small playing field. If you want to improve your enterprise, you have to open up the scope. You have to open up the scope. To improve the enterprise, you've got to be working at all those levels. And ultimately, the goal is sustainability. The poor quality director doesn't have to spend most of his life trying to keep ISO 9000 compliance in place, which we tend to do. Because we don't have that scope, we don't have that infusion of knowledge and experience at the C-suite. That's not to say the C-suite are not interested, but nobody's ever approached some of these principles with them. And they're very capable. They're responsible for vision and strategy for the business. You're absolutely wasting their time if they're firefighting. I want a CEO or a president of the company looking out for my future in the business. I want to be here a long time. I want to enjoy what I do in this company. And eventually, I want to be rewarded. It's that simple. So the playing field has to extend beyond process. It has to extend to the systems, the 12 systems, and eventually the president's responsibility, the C-suite's responsibility is to ensure that those 12 systems are working together in harmony on a common goal and a common strategy. It's not rocket science, but unfortunately eating that elephant, if you've got 150 processes, is very difficult. And you don't always need everybody on board, and that's another thing. I've had situations where I've presented this to the C-suite and they're not interested. It looks like hard work. You know, their time frames, if you haven't solved anything in 90 days, they're not interested. And I've worked with vice presidents of procurement that said, I don't care what they want to do, just come and put this solution here. And if you do it in a process or you do it in a system, it goes viral. Anything that process touches will catch on. Anything that system touches, it will catch on. Because it's the right thing to do. So I've seen that too. You can't say, well, my leadership team's not on board. It doesn't matter. If you've got a process owner, it just takes longer, that's all. Process owner's doing a good job. They're in control of their boundaries, and they're going to put measurements in place, and they're going to exceed expectation. So just let me know, this is not easy street. This doesn't come easy to many businesses. Thinking business improvement is not easy. Knowing who your customers, actually accepting that the purchasing their customer is the vendor is very hard to swallow. It's transactional. Business process is about transactions. Somebody giving something of value to someone else so they can execute and add value to it. It's a chain of events. So that culture, that process-based thinking has to be instilled. Now, I may be an exception when I look at processes, and that happened a few years ago when I got robbed in Marseille. It was a very traumatic experience, and at the end of it was almost a Clouseau Pink Panther event during that day with the French police. But at the end of the day, my wife turned around to me, she said, "That was terrible." And I said, "No, it wasn't. It was a neat process. I was talking about the robbery." Why? Because if I had gone on the travel advisory, the process was documented in the travel advisory. It said, "Do not drive a foreign car in France." I was driving a Swiss car in France. "Do not travel down the dock area of Marseille." I did that. Don't pull up to close to parked cars. Leave enough space for you to go. I did that one too. So I was going through this checklist. I got quite excited. I did all these things. And I got robbed, including locking the door. I didn't do that. Lock the door. Women, where do they put their handbag? At their feet, on the passenger side. Don't do that. We did that too. So we had this great checklist. So I got very excited by the robbery because it was a process. And they were very successful. And the worst thing you can do, by the way, is chase the robber downtown Marseille in the dock area, because if you actually tackled them and brought them to the ground, the people around you would probably attack you and save the robber. But it was a process. It's a journey, not a destination. It's something you have to work at. And it's not always successful. You look at your dashboard. Some things you try don't work, but you rapidly change and you make an adjustment. And then the dashboard goes in the right direction again. The discipline. This is a very tough cultural issue for people because they feel like you're forcing them to do something. And I come back to the situation. There's a group of people in your business who are subject matter experts that says that this is the best way to do something. Your only excuse is if you have a better way. It's your only excuse for not following the process. Immediate customer focus. You don't have to worry about the end product and meeting the quota, meeting the numbers. All you have to worry about is the process that you're touching. If you satisfy them and they're satisfying their customer, you stand a likely chance of meeting the goals and expectation and the strategy of your business. Continuous improvement is not optional in a BPI system. My boss once told me when I joined that, "What are your goals?" And I said, "I'm going to do a good job." He said, "I pay you to do that." That's an expectation. And then he turned around to tell me, he said, "The way, Don, that you'll get differentiated in this business, if you can prove to me that you've made the business better in some way, ideally focus on your process. If you can show me a better process, that's what I will value. Because I expect you to do a good job." Trust is essential. Trust is absolutely essential. If you don't trust someone in your business, they shouldn't be there. But you don't protect your business for the minority and cause everyone else to suffer because you don't trust them. I see procuring agents that will order $1 million worth of parts, but they can't sign off on a $300 ticket for themselves. Their trust is $1 million. W.L. Gore, one of the 2 best companies that I've ever walked into, I asked that question because I was mapping their process and I said, "What's your authority level?" "I don't understand the question." I said, "Well, how much can you approve?" "I don't understand the question." "Well, can you approve $100,000? Yes. $1 million? Yes. $10 million? Yes. $100 million? Yes." I said, "No." "Yes." They have another policy, another principle, I guess. It's called the waterline principle. If you don't feel comfortable in making a decision, you go to someone who will help you make that decision. Anyone in that company can actually walk into the president's office if they think it's a presidential decision. Interesting concept. You'd never mention the word manager in that business. There are no managers. There's a leader and there's associates. Everyone in this business is important. We do not set a hierarchy. I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to do that, but it was one of the things that I learned from. Critical success factors. You've heard about some of these. This list should not be new to you. Without leadership commitment, it's not going to work. As simple as that. If you haven't deployed processes that are effective and efficient and continuously improved, it's not going to work. My mission when I go into a business is I look at the process owners and I say to myself, my mission is for me to make you successful. If I don't make you successful, this is not going to work. So my focus is educating process owners and system owners to be successful. And if they don't engage, it's not going to work. As soon as I leave, problem comes back. And I'm sure some of you have seen that before. When consultants come, they go, problem comes back. They haven't left any value behind them. That's not all of them. The experts are there. You get them engaged. The process owners, if you've got 100 process owners, you've got 100 people working on those processes. They've got 100 people working on the puzzle pieces. You've got 12 system owners working on the bigger puzzle pieces. You've got the enterprise owner making sure that those systems are working effectively together. The process owner works with their teams. Their team has the same goal to make sure their process is successful. So now you've got 2,000 problem solvers in the business. Systematic improvement. That's the goal. If you don't invest in this, it's not going to work. And I don't mean money. I mean investment in your talent, your people. That's where it's all about. Training them. One of my clients is the Mohawk tribe. It's a tribe up in Canada. And if you are familiar with the Indian tribes in America, they're autonomous. They have their own governments. And one of the tribal leaders said to me, I'm fed up with people coming in here fishing for me. I need someone to come in here and teach my people to fish. I always remember that. You probably saw that on a slide. That was a learning experience for me. And I'm sure you're familiar with that saying. Monitoring is important. As I said, trust without verification is not acceptable either. We have to have meaningful measurements in place that if we make changes, we need to see the impact immediately, not 6 months from now, not a year from now. We have to see it immediately. It's tactile feedback. So those measurements have to be not only meaningful to the process, they have to be meaningful to the process owner and team. So what's the value of BPI? You should look at it as a return on investment. It's that simple. We've seen this over and over again from our clients. That mine in Bolivia is 25% of the gross national product of Bolivia right now. Integrate customer values. Our internal customers are probably more important than the external customers. And risk reduction. Risk, compliance, controls need to be in the process. They need to be understood by the people following the process. Not by a select group of people in regulatory or compliance, but those subject matter experts need to embed that knowledge. So when the auditor comes around, when the auditors come around to our businesses, they don't just talk to the quality manager or the regulator. The quality manager or the director says, talk to the process owners. Don't address the question at me, talk to the process owners. And sometimes the process owners will say the same thing. Well, don't talk to me, talk to somebody that is doing the work. That usually floors a lot of auditors because they're not used to that. They're not used to people that work in a process understanding the rules and regulations that apply to their process. They just don't. So it's about risk reduction, whether it's safety, environmental, or financial. So that's really what I had to say. I don't know how long have I been? 10 minutes? Got 10 minutes left?
Q&A.
Yeah, we're on Q&A right now. And yeah, I'm on Q&A right now. How much time have we got left for Q&A?
10 to 15 minutes.
Okay, I probably went on longer than I should. I apologize. So again, I appreciate your patience in listening to me for over 2 hours, and I wanted to leave a little bit more time. This presentation is available on our cloud. All I need is if you're interested in it, I will supply this together with the materials and examples of companies that really embrace this program. So be very happy to do that.
What the time will take doing the process? 1 year or 6?
To what level?
Semi level 3.
Level 3. The fastest I've ever seen it done is 5 months. Typically, it takes about 12 months.
12 months.
Typically. They don't do it all at once either. They do it in stages. They do it the core systems first, then they do the resource ones next, then they do the quality ones next, and then the enterprise. So they do it in stages.
Okay, policy, we can say it is the inputs for doing the process.
Policy is a strange beast. I believe policies are rules. You need to find where the rules apply in the systems and processes.
Then you can write the process.
No, we write our processes by talking to the people that do the work. So we don't start with the procedures in place. In fact, it doesn't mean to say we ignore them, but remember one of the issues are people don't understand, A, what the process is, and the procedures may not be followed. So we need to understand the current state, and we get that by talking to the process owners, the users, and customers and suppliers to that process.
Yes, if I may ask, first of all, thanks, Dan, and it's our pleasure to have you here at SASO, and as well we are thanking Saudi Quality Society, as well AAC company. Most of these things, which is either models for a business or tools, usually came from enterprises on the commercial side. The challenge and the question that I keep asking people like you who are expertise with these tools about the governmental entities. How can these models or tools fit for governmental entities? And if you have an experience with any governmental entity that not a commercial one,
Yeah, not a commercial.
and what's the difference?
Yeah, government, for instance. Has anybody ever mapped murder investigation? No one? Okay, you map that? Yes, police have processes too. Yeah, so government, we've been involved in many aspects of government. Different industries, there's over 60 of them. I actually can't list them all to you, whether it be commercial. But businesses, I would say 80 to 90% of our businesses are not to do with manufacturing. Why? Why do you think that is? Manufacturing processes, a lot of them are already under a state of control. Manufacturing, in most cases, are in good shape. It's all the supportive enterprises that are not in good shape. Government, in particular, is in horrendous shape. That's no disrespect to government. It's just that they may not have been exposed to some of the tools and capabilities that industry have been using for years. So lawyers, if you've ever worked with a bunch of lawyers, that's a difficult bunch of people to work with, and they do not think processes. So this is applicable in any industry. It's a very diverse group that we've worked with. Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Thank you for a nice discussion, Mr. James. Nice lead in there from government. About 80% of the GDP in economies in most first world countries anyway is not manufacturing, it's services.
That's right. That's correct.
Okay.
Bolivia was raw materials.
This is an exception that perhaps proves the rule. So I've got a lot of questions, but I can boil it down to one.
Yes, yes.
And the first one is, in manufacturing processes and engineering processes where the entire BPM comes from really at the end of the day, you can draw wiring diagrams. When you come to services industries, and very often government service industries, you have fuzzy logic.
Yes.
So my question overall is, how do you approach? And the first part is, how do you approach the fuzzy logic that is difficult to reduce to a wiring diagram? And the second one is on the subject of the internal customer versus the ultimate customer.
Yes.
Also, I think very, very apropos for governments, healthcare.
Yeah, healthcare.
All these things where the ultimate customer is 4 orders down the line.
Yeah. Everything we do is a process. Getting ready in the morning is a process. Okay, we do it the same way. Why? Because it's the quickest, best way to do it. And you're right. When you go into some industries, the first thing they want to do is not follow a process. Yeah. So, but they are doing something. I always remember permitting. Building permits, that's a government process. And it was taking them about 27 days to turn around a permit. They were happy with that because best in class was 24 days, so they thought that was really good. So how did they get it down to 5? Because they defined their process, they looked for business opportunities, and they started solving them. But you're right, that's not how they naturally think. So it can apply everything we do. Everything we do in our society is a process. But like you said, in manufacturing design, we've been doing that for years. It's not in those other industries, and it's certainly not in things like sales and marketing. They think it's about people relationship and not process. And I've often gone into sales and marketing, they said they don't need it. Manufacturing needs it, we don't. Then I'll say to them, who's your best salesperson? And they'll say, John in New Jersey. And I'll say, what are they doing that you're not? They're doing something better than you. What is it? Good question.
The business. Thank you very much. First, thank you for your presentation. Actually, it's very helpful, interesting. And I would like to ask about the business development, if we say in any company. Are they responsible for owning the process or governing the process in each division? Or
That's a good question. Are you talking about if there are multiple enterprises and there's one process that's common to multiple enterprises?
If there is a business development team in a company, and
yes.
Most likely business development will focus on the external customer.
Yes.
But in order to get that results, they need to make sure that the processes are improved. And so can we say that they are an owner for the processes inside the enterprise?
If it's business development, their main product is, like you said, working with the customer. Finding good customers, getting orders from customers, sustaining those customers to ensure they're repeat customers. That's their primary focus. They touch other systems within the enterprise. The touch point, like for instance in manufacturing, is when you get an order, sales will transfer that order into production. And that order better be what? Accurate, and it better be come in the lead time that the operation can manage. So the business development group, yes, their primary focus is to bring in customers, but their biggest win is if the customer's satisfied. A salesperson or a business development person, they'll put in a lot of effort to get one customer. The last thing you want to do is A, lose them, and B, not get repeat business for them. The only way you do that is by having a relationship with the internal processes and systems. A smart salesman or a business development individual will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your informative presentation. I actually was sitting to that side raising my hand, but I realized that I'm outside your vision, so I came to the center.
It's age, don't worry about it. That's why I've got these.
My question is about, you mentioned the importance of the process owner.
Yes.
And how he has to be agile to the requests of the business by changing his process rapidly. And hanging the process probably on a wall, so everybody, when he has comments, he mark it up and change it immediately.
Yes.
Now, that is how do you see this is easy by having the technology, automating that process? Because sometimes the technology, it's a paradox. We need it to solve the business problems and automate it, make it faster, agile, but in the same time, it makes it difficult to change.
Yeah, it's no different than an engineer having a schematic. You still need a schematic, right? If you want to update the system, you have to understand what it's currently doing. One of the things I mentioned is automation is definitely where it's going, to automate repetitive tasks. You still need a good image to do that. The image must be accurate. Current state. Some people don't want to worry about current state. They want to go to future state. The people are in current state. Unless you bring the people along, they will not follow future state. You see that over and over again. They automate something, they buy a new system or an upgrade on Oracle or SAP, and they're still using it the way they used the old one. So getting the people on the same page, and as you speed up the processes and automate them, you use the map as a tool to stay up with that. So if anyone has done simulation here, you need a good image. You have to understand the current state. And the only way you can show someone is that schematic. Yes?
Thank you for appreciated and lovely presentation. How we could say or identify about an ideal process mapping model as a best practice for multi-industries? Take an example, Eaton for telecommunication industry. Thank you.
Okay, so is your question how to identify best practice? That's everyone's goal, right? I've said that's one of the major uses. I don't look at it like that. I don't see best practice as something that you just jump to. I see it that this is where we are. Our process that may be 80% inefficient because it has non-value. Getting the people to start eating that elephant to a place where you want to go. As I said, I wouldn't come in and say, if you want to see a purchasing system, best one I've ever seen, here it is, go do it. I would never do that. Because sometimes I go into a business and I find them doing something better than I've ever seen before. If you give them the right tools, they will get to best practice. They will lean out your system. They will perform. If you've got meaningful measurements, it's a journey. And you have to bring people along on that journey. Consultants can't force them to do it. Quality people, they are the people doing the work. Remember, the second biggest problem is even if you've got the greatest process, not followed is absolutely worthless. And quite often when I go back, I judge certainly our success by going back to a business 5 years from now. And I'll look at it and I say, that's better than I ever envisaged it would be. And that's because the people, the experts, were allowed to use the tools to be successful. So all I'm interested in seeing a company doing is getting better in a very systematic way. That's the goal. I've ignored this side of the room, so I don't know, we want to take some questions this side of the room. I apologize. Is there any questions from this side of the room? Yes.
Hi. Thank you for the presentation. We've been talking about how important to map the processes, but my question is for how deep we should go to map processes.
Okay.
Sometimes the mapping itself becoming exhausted.
Yes. Yeah. It takes us, in our model, and various companies do it, it takes us 6 hours to get a process ready for deployment. 6 hours.
Yeah, but my question is, there is
How deep?
There's some level.
Okay.
We don't have to map these processes. To follow, follow step by step. It's becoming exhausted.
Yeah, we would tackle it in stages. For instance, our first pass at a process is about 80%, second pass about 90%, third pass is 95%. 95% is good enough. because now you can deploy it and get most of the people to follow it. Now, to answer your question, how deep you need to go will be based upon your metrics. I would prefer to have a lean system that you make deeper versus having a very deep system and lean it out. So getting people to follow a process at a very basic level, once that's been demonstrated, you go as deep as you need to. And if it's human error, if it's one of the 13% of the issues is human error, you have to ask yourself the question, are the people not trained and skilled enough to do the job, so they have to be trained? Or it's a job or task that's not done frequently and is very prone to mistakes, and so they may need to have the instructions on how to make the coffee, because they only make it once every 6 months. Some businesses I go into, textile businesses, the average worker's been there 30 years. If you put documentation in front of them, they would probably tell you where to put it. Now, on the other hand, I go into businesses that have an 85% turnover per annum. So getting people up to speed very rapidly requires in-depth knowledge to be either videotaped or documented. But what you don't do is over-document your system. So I'd rather see a lean map that people follow than a very complex one. And then you build it up over time. So, and your measurements will tell you that. If you've got human error, that means we're not educating our folks, and you don't need documentation to do that. Or, in some cases, you need to give them access to information, readily give access to information. So what is the right information? So that's not an easy answer, but it's a very good question. But my preference is to have a lean system that's followed, and then putting more detail in.
Thank you.
Yes. Flow charting. Flow charting, if you looked at a flow chart, and I think I showed you sort of an example, I can give you an example of that. Flow charts have basic tasks and decisions, which is the basic backbone of a process map. It's like the skeleton. A process map has got muscles, skin, flesh, and hair. It is literally, has all the information necessary for you to execute the process successfully. A flow chart is really a backbone. It's a very integral part of it. It shows you the main activities and decisions that take place. Yeah, our first pass map, 80%, looks more like a flow chart, because you have to agree what the backbone is before you start putting the muscles on. Otherwise, if the backbone changes, everything's going to change. So you have to make sure of that. So it's the starting point. So it's integral to a map.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for your presentation. My question, how to evaluate the process mapping, especially during the planning stage. I mean that...
What stage was that?
During the planning stage.
Okay.
How do you evaluate the process mapping? I mean that how to assure the planning to some extent is effective and efficiently and capable especially before the implementation. I mean that from the first time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, the question is how do you ensure the process is efficient and effective before you implement it? Remember what I mentioned is current state. Many people don't even have documented what they're currently doing. So your first goal is to have a schematic that represents what you're doing. Remember, measurements is a part of deploying. So quite often business processes don't even have the measurements. I would rather get it out there and used and get mileage on it than spend a lot of time in a classroom theoretically. I've actually had situations where even after an extended period of time, the first time you show the process to a larger group and where you socialize it, they'll say, what's this? They say, that's what we do. And they'll say, no, it isn't. So it's better to find that out as soon as possible. And So getting something out there that people can critique and throw stones at is really the goal. Getting something out there that is usable. The metrics will then take over and then drive the process to continuous improvement. So we do not spend a lot of time writing the document. We get the experts in a room, we spend about 6 hours. It's good enough to get out there, we release it, we start using it. When you start using it, you find the opportunities very rapidly. Then you have to have a very rapid change process in place. Put the changes in. So it's really an engineering principle. It's not a scientific principle. Scientists has to be perfect. No, it's good enough to use. Getting people to follow the process most of the time consistently is more important than waiting 2 years for the perfect process that may never, ever get implemented. Well, yes, over 2 years, you're in constant motion. You're constant motion. That's a very good point.
Excellent.
I better shut up. Sorry.
Yes. I'm very impressed with the questions and the discussion. Thank you, gentlemen, for there is no ladies here, so thank you very much for taking the time to really this event will not be successful without your presence and your participation. So many, many thanks to you and your interest in attending, and hopefully we'll see you in many other events in the future. Special thanks to Modern Electronics Company, and especially for Engineer Khalid Al-Madi, who has been very instrumental in bringing Mr. James to us to share this. Thank you very much, Engineer Khalid. And we'd like to please join me in thanking Mr. James for a very wonderful presentation.
Pleasure. Yeah. I have cards. If you got the information, just send it to me, and we'll give you a link to the site, and you can download not only this presentation, but also some examples of process maps and some case studies. So you're very, very welcome to do that. And I have cards if anybody is interested. Great, thank you.
نصلي يا أخوان.
Somebody's handing my card back. Oh, no, thank you very, very much. Oh, no, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much. They're giving them out here. Let me see if I got some more.
تبغى المحاضرة موجودة كلها مسجلة على اليوتيوب. على اليوتيوب. طيب كويس. ادخل على موقع الهيئة اليوتيوب. أنا ما غنيت النفس. لا اسمعها مرة ثانية. لا ذاك كويس. اي لا تلقاها على اليوتيوب. شوف هذه المحاضرة كلها. ادخل على موقع الهيئة أساسه هيئة المواصفات. تلقاها الحين.
Oh, no. Yes, pleasure. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, no, just drop me an email and we'll give you a link to our site. And if you ever download this, and give some examples. Oh, no, thank you for spending the time listening to go.
الله يعافيك.
I'll walk off with it. I don't think I had the mic on. Oh, I did.